Right, so everything Israel have done since October 7th has been, so we're repeatedly told by Israel, but certainly also by our mainstream media as well, that it's all been in retaliation for Hamas invading Israel, striking a music festival and the nearby agricultural settlements, the kibbutzes, where they also tell us Hamas committed horrendous acts of atrocity as they did so, much already debunked at that, when clearly they had no time to spend, for example, burning people alive. But people died at the hands of Hamas or Israel is up in the air. And they did indeed take hostages, that much we know. But more and more scrutiny and investigation of that night certainly is required to ascertain who exactly is responsible for those deaths. But it has also revealed a great many of those deaths were caused by Israel themselves, by admissions from Israel even. They've admitted it, even if they didn't necessarily mean to. But further analysis by others, either in the know, from eyewitnesses to survivors or to experts in such matters, are all pointing the finger of blame squarely at Israel and not at Hamas. So for how long can this carry on being ignored? Because although, yes, we're now counting down the days until the International Court of Justice opens proceedings on all of this, but people are dying on a daily basis in Gaza still, and it looks ever more possible that this is all based on a bigger and bigger lie in and of itself. Right, so there's no denying Hamas went into Israel and took hostages and people died in the process of that happening. There is blame on both sides in all likelihood, but given how disproportionate the response by Israel was on Hamas for that night, one night of incursion followed by 3 months and counting of genocide, it matters as more information comes out implying that more and more of the fatalities on the night of October 7th were due to Israeli actions rather than that of Hamas. The scale of the loss of life in Gaza has been immense. It's beyond comprehension. 30,000 people dead and counting. If Israel were responsible for more of the deaths on October 7th, though, then what they are doing now is even more objectionable than previously thought. And let's remember here, Gaza and everyone in it, Hamas and non-Hamas affiliated alike, are prisoners of Israel. They have a right to resist that. Anyway, there's a few instances I want to talk about where Israel being at fault on the night of October 7th is now verifiable. Firstly, there was a gaffe by Netanyahu's mouthpiece and former Israeli ambassador to the UK, Mark Regev. His replacement hasn't been an improvement, has she? When questioned on US news channel MSNBC by Mehdi Hassan, though, regarding the number of Israeli deaths on the night of October 7th being revised down from what Israel had originally said previously, Regev said, "We had the number at 1,400 casualties, and now we've revised that down to 1,200 because we understood that we had overestimated. We had made a mistake. There were actually bodies that were so badly burnt we thought they were ours. In the end, they were Hamas terrorists." Right, so there were 1,400 bodies, but you accidentally counted 200 Hamas operatives amongst them because they were so badly burned. It took them 6 weeks to identify this error. But the biggest error on Mark Regev's part is the admission about the bodies being so badly burned. At no point did Hamas have the opportunity, or the time, or more importantly the means, to burn bodies. But with the IDF going in with their tanks and their gunships, they absolutely did. And there's also the small matter of Hamas. If they were able to and inclined to burn people, probably wouldn't have burnt their own people, would they? It was an accidental admission of responsibility in effect, but that was just the start. Then there are the accounts of eyewitnesses and survivors. One Israeli kibbutz survivor recounted how several Hamas operatives entered her house where they ate some bananas. They then told her, "Don't worry, we're Muslim, we won't hurt you," and then they left. In her words, she said, "They came in and I told them I have 2 children here. They look around and then one says to me in English, 'Don't worry, I'm a Muslim, we won't hurt you.' On one hand, it caught me by surprise. On the other hand, it took a lot of pressure off me. I sat down with my kids and the fighters brought chairs from the dining room. There was an armed fighter with us all the time and the rest were walking around the house. One of them sees bananas on the counter and asks, 'May I have one?' And I say, 'Yes, you can.' She actually laughed as she recounted it to camera for Middle East Monitor. Then there was the account by one of the hostages taken by Hamas who was released. You might remember seeing some footage of this on the news. Even the mainstream showed a little bit of this. An 85-year-old woman who, when asked about her captivity and her captors, she was one of the first hostages released, you might remember. She said that she'd been treated kindly, promised they wouldn't be harmed, and ate the same food as that of the Hamas operatives. She actually shook hands as she was released with them and wished them peace as she went. Contrast that with opinions given by Israeli eyewitnesses again on the conduct of the IDF. A 44-year-old mother of three called Yasmin Porat was interviewed on Israel's Channel 12 a week after the attack, and she made the claim that Israeli citizens were killed by Israeli forces and not by Hamas, that these people died because of very heavy shelling and even tank fire. She said a Palestinian fighter who spoke Hebrew told her, "Look at me well, we're not going to kill you. We want to take you to Gaza. We're not going to kill you, so be calm. You're not going to die." Any notion that Hamas went into Israel with the intention of killing people seems to be false, based on these testimonies and many others like them. Their goal seems clear: to take hostages, presumably with an aim to get concessions of some kind from Israel. We know Israel destroyed houses with tank fire. We know helicopter gunships targeted people fleeing the Nova Music Festival, also hit that night. There's footage of that online. Certainly the firepower Israel brought was more than capable of killing and incinerating, so those burned bodies Mark Regev talked about. I struggle to see how it can be proven that Hamas did that, without means to, and without motive, especially with the many accounts only ever talking contrary to that of the official Israeli line. And the latest source of food for thought on this has come from another surprising source, a former US Assistant Secretary of Defense called Chaz Freeman. In a video clip with a behaviour analyst called Thomas Carrott, Freeman was asked about what he called the quite credible evidence that Israel was behind the deaths of Israelis on October 7th. And Freeman said, "Yes, and there are two reasons for this. One is the Israelis lack discipline and the training necessary to respond effectively to the hostage-taking that Hamas carried out, which was aimed primarily by Hamas at taking Israeli soldiers. The kibbutzes are garrisoned with soldiers. They are military settlements. Many of the people who live there, some of the women, are in the Israeli reserves, and Hamas sought to take them as hostages. Undisciplined fire by helicopters with Hellfire missiles or by tanks with incendiary rounds directed at buildings is what happened, and this is a disgrace in military terms. The second reason is something called a Hannibal Directive. Israel has an enormous amount of Palestinian hostages, people it has put in prisons, often with no charges, sometimes with fake charges. And many times in the past, Israeli hostages have been exchanged for Palestinian hostages in a vastly disproportionate ratio. So the Hannibal Directive basically says that rather than get into bargaining over a hostage exchange, you should just kill the Israeli hostages along with their captors. So an ill-trained army with orders to kill their own people in place, I've spoken about Hannibal Directives in other videos before, but the evidence from all manner of sources is casting more and more critical and condemnatory eye on Israel here. The court case will spell things out even more. These matters will become ever more clear in the days to come, I dare say. But Chaz Freeman had a warning for Israel too. When people think of Israel in the past, they thought of it as a refuge for the victims of the Holocaust. Now they will think of it as the home of perpetrators of genocide. When they think of Israel, they will think of burned buildings and dead babies. This is an image problem of a fundamental nature, and from the point of view of Israel, it strips Israel of its protection by charges of anti-Semitism against anyone who is critical of Israel. Because to be critical of people who are carrying out genocide cannot be anti-Semitism. It cannot be considered immoral. Anti-Semitism is a despicable attitude, but to oppose genocide by Israel is not. How is history going to look back on these events? Is that going to change how people look at Israel and think of it in the days and years to come? There's every danger of that from their perspective. Roll on the court case beginning on Thursday. I really hope we're going to get an interim order for a ceasefire quickly, as is South Africa's plan. They got a massive endorsement for their efforts the other day, incidentally. You should watch this video to hear all about that, though. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.